But what I would like to mention are 4 points about the gold standard in very general terms. Why I have come to accept the idea that a gold standard is the only standard that can be used if you want a free market and you want a sound, healthy economy. First off, it's the issue of central planning. So often there are many conservatives who believe that central planning in farming and agriculture and producing steel and doing anything in the economy outside of money is a disaster. They say, well, look at the results of central planning in Russia. Look at the central planning in any socialist nation, and they reject it outright, and I believe correctly. But in the same sense, they reject central planning in every other area, but wholeheartedly endorse the same concept with central planning in money. And I have come to the conclusion that central planning of money is just as disastrous as central planning in farming. And therefore, just the general idea, the notion that man is capable of planning the economy by controlling the money. But the one thing is different about planning centrally the money supply as compared to planning farming. Farming only feeds us, but the money sustains every single transaction. It is a participant in everything that we do. It is the unit of account that we have to measure every transaction. All our services and all our goods are measures in terms of the unit of account. And if we believe that we can plan centrally and determine that unit of account without the market participating, I think we get what we have now, very chaotic conditions, which are bound to get more chaotic after a period of time. So I don't believe that central planning in money can be successful. I happen to believe and accept the ideas of the Austrian School of Economics, as Mises in particular explained, that the business cycle is precisely caused by central planning of money, and that the booms and busts are inevitable. That as we drive the economy this year and for next year's election, you will see conditions improve, but sure enough, you will see the consequence of the inflation that we have today. In a couple years, you will see the recession, if not the depression of '86 or '87. So it is for this reason, out of a humanitarian concern for our people, that we must reject the notion of central planning in money, just as we reject the central ideas of central planning in agriculture or steel manufacturing. So central planning of money, I reject outright. The second major reason why I reject the notion of paper money is the issue of power. I believe we must address this because even though those who wield the power and the control of the money, I sincerely believe they're well motivated to do what is good and right for the people. Just as the liberal interventionist is assuming he's doing good by building houses for the poor people. But they never take into account that they tear down more houses than they build up, and that so much of the HUD money goes to building country club communities. So I would say the same thing happens because the power is abused and misdirected. But it's an ominous power. There is no other power greater than the power over money, the power to create and contract the money supply, the power to control the purchasing power of your money. Throughout history, this has proven to be the most sought-after monopolistic power of man. And it has become more sophisticated over the decades and over the centuries, more sophisticated now and more international in scope than ever before. So I see the issue of power and the control over money as being something that we cannot ignore, we must address. I believe closely associated with this is the issue of morality as well. By what moral right do we have to create purchasing power out of thin air? Whether it's done by the creation of credit or Federal Reserve notes, or whether it's the creation of SDRs in an international scope, by what right do they do this? Is it any more moral to dilute the value of your purchasing power of the money you hold in your wallet than it is for the farmer to dilute the milk supply with water? I would say there's an issue of morality here just as strong as the issue of power. I happen to believe also, because it's a moral issue more than an economic issue, It is for this reason that the people have lost trust in their government, trust in the banks, trust in business, trust in themselves, and that we are a nation of distrust. And it's for this reason I believe that until we restore trust in government, trust in the system, and trust in the money, there will be no resolution of this problem. It is the issue of trust in people and trust in money that must come before you can start talking about nickeling and diming it, trying to get back to a balanced budget, because that certainly hasn't worked. So I think it's important to address the issue of central planning, the issue of power, and third, I think that we must address in general terms the issue of the origin of money. I know that's been talked about, and we recognize, those of us who believe in commodity money, clearly understand that money, paper money and credit creation didn't come out of the marketplace. That came out of the heads and the fantasies of the intellectuals and the government officials of those who want paper to be money, but never out of the marketplace. So I would say the paper standard is bucking history, and it's bucking economic law and economic truth, and they only can do it with force and more power to make people accept it, because economically and historically, paper is not money. It can't be money. It's only money because we're forced to use it and because there's a residual trust in the pieces of paper that we carried around, because at one time it did have real value. Just think for a moment. If all of us were stranded on a small island and we had absolutely nothing else, no trade, but we were all put on the island and we were expected to survive, we would have to do what to create capital to survive? We would have to get our food and build our houses and make our tools. And everything that we had in excess of what we consume could be our capital, and we could trade it. But how many of you would accept the idea that if we were all working busily and making trades and somebody gives a bushel of wheat for a bushel of corn, how many of you would accept the notion if we had the one individual to arrive on the beach and he said, I'll solve all your problems, I'm going to create wealth for you. I have this little thing called a printing press, and I'm going to print up Federal Reserve notes, and you'll all be wealthy. How many would trust the individual? He would probably be thrown off the island for coming up with a scandalous idea. It wouldn't work. You have to have something that people seek after and they hold as something important and something that they will hold as money. History shows that people have chosen gold first and probably silver second. But that most people in the economy, they'd rather have cigarettes than pieces of paper.